Okay, so let's actually talk about this concept of tracing and um, and and how that all works. Okay, so I'm going back over here, and let's just go. And this is how tracing works. This is how it works when someone comes to my office. Okay, so let's just talk real life, right? Somebody comes and says, okay, I'm filling out this form, and then the issue will come up. Either I'll raise it or they'll know to ask about it. Hey, I received an inheritance from Aunt Sally.
Yeah.
Okay, and we separated this year, but I received that inheritance 5 years ago, and I don't want to share it. Right? That's my money. I heard that it's my money. I don't share it. That's the lay understanding of it. And so the process is to you have to go backwards in time and then go forwards in time. Okay, in order to do this exclusion. And this is where, going back to Jack and Jill, right? Jill could exclude up to 4, and this is where the work comes in of how to actually exclude that 4. Okay, so the starting point is go back in time to where you received the money. Okay, so go back that 5 years, and I would say to the client, like, how did you receive the money? Was it an inheritance? Was it a gift? Right? And so let's say it's an inheritance, because that's usually easier to start as a baseline. Okay, can you show me the will? And just the will, and if you can get a bank statement showing the deposit of the money, there you go. That's the starting point.
Okay.
There you go. That's the starting point of the tracing. Sometimes people don't have the will. There are other estate documents you can get, but the point is that you want to show that you received the money from a third party during the marriage, just like the statute says, right? Okay, so then that's going back, and you're proving the receipt of the property during the marriage. Okay, that's easy enough, or I should say that's work enough that at least you're on the game board kind of thing towards excluding the property. Okay, then you need to trace it. Now, tracing, if you think about tracing paper, and making a line, that's exactly what we're going to do. And let's take the most easiest tracing. Let's say it's an actual property that's not a matrimonial home, it's just a property. So you can say, well, I received the money, and here's the purchase of the property with that money. You can see the money going out of the bank account into the property, and then it sits in that property, and that property still exists today. So that's an easy line, from point A to point B, to show you that it still exists on valuation date. So that's an asset, right? And so many you can have a bank account that also you can show the money coming in, and then it just sitting there. And where it gets a little bit complicated is where it gets mixed. Okay, so let's just quickly talk about that mixing of accounts. So this account is in your name, and you received $5,000, but there was $2,000 already in the account. Okay, so now there's $7,000 in the account, and then you remove $2,000 from the account. So now there's $5,000 left. Okay, and let's make this very simple. That's how much that's left at valuation date. So how much of that money is excluded? Is it, do we say that, well, the $2,000 was there first, and then you put in 5,000? Like, how do you deal with that? It's simple math. There was 2,000 before, you received 5,000, that's clearly excluded, and then you took out 2,000. Okay. So you're left with 5,000, but it's of mixed money.
Wow, this is very tricky. Okay.
Oh, this is tricky. And so thankfully, people have litigated, around the turn of the century, I guess, in the year 2000, but in the late 90s to the early 2000s is when all the litigation was on this issue. Okay. And so very briefly, I'll tell you the answer, but I'll tell you the answer after just going through some of the scenarios here. Some people have argued that it should be first in, first out. Okay, so in other words, if the $2,000 was there, then you put in the 5,000, you remove 2,000. Well, that 2,000 that you removed is the first money that you put in, which was the 2,000 that's not excluded, came out first. First in, first out.
Oh, I see.
Okay, well then some people said, well, that's not fair. We should do, and that's called FIFO, first in, first out. And then some people said, no, let's do last in, first out, LIFO. Right?
Okay.
And then the case law kind of goes in the direction of saying, well, maybe we should do it like on a pro rata basis. Pro rata means, well, let's do it as a percentage. Okay, what's the 2,000 removed as a percentage of the 2,000 that was originally there and the 5,000 that was added? You could do it as a percentage. Now, I'm not going to do that math with you right now just because it's going to hurt my brain, but it can be done on a spreadsheet very quickly, right? To do a percentage sharing. And the law settled on what's called the common sense approach, which means that depending on the circumstance, we can use any of those that makes the most sense.
Oh my.
Okay. And from my experience, it's usually the pro rata way because it's the easiest to explain. Okay, so now think about how this can be complicated because we're talking about $2,000 sitting in an account and then $5,000 added and then 2,000 removed. But what if there was income that grew and it was not excluded? And then more money went in that was not excluded, and then money came out and money came in and money came out and kind of. And the answer is, the concept of tracing is equitable, meaning we want it to be fair on the one hand, and we also want to include as much as we can into net family property. So there's a tension there. Right? Fairness, but we also want to include everything. Like, in other words, the exclusion is an exception. So you got to do some work here. And so the short answer is it's really on you. If you want this exclusion, you better work at it and explain how it gets from point A, which is the receipt, to point B, which is valuation date. Okay, and so if that involves bank statements going through 5 years and statements and spreadsheets explaining it, then so be it. Okay, there has to be the common sense approach says as well that if that bank account gets drawn down to zero or near zero and then new money goes into it, obviously we're not doing a pro rata report approach because that money's gone. Right. So this could get complicated. Many times people don't even have the bank statements, which is another problem, right? And so each case has to be assessed as to risk, and you have to do your best to try and see where the gaps are and see how to fill those gaps. Okay, just to go back here. So again, the income, whether or not it's excluded, may complicate that tracing. Let's say you got a $5,000 inheritance and you bought a car for $5,000. Okay, and now the car is worth $2,000. So again, you have to go back to the statute where it's a property at valuation date, right? So you're only able to exclude what exists. So you're only, even though the inheritance was 5,000 and you could clearly trace it, well, only 2,000 of it exists because it depreciated.
Got it. Okay.
That the last and most complicated are joint accounts. What happens if you take that money, you got $5,000, and then you put it into an account with your spouse?
Yes.
Okay. So that triggers another section in the Family Law Act that deals with money in joint accounts.
Oh, wow.
And the very short answer, because just to move this forward, is you're basically, and there are exceptions to this, but you are basically gifting 1/2 of that money to your spouse. Okay. And so your spouse, let's say there's $5,000, your spouse now owns $2,500 and you own $2,500 in that joint account. However, recall that the exclusion is only from a third party, so your spouse is receiving it from you. That is not excluded. But your $2,500 is excluded. It remains excluded because you still have it. And so, absent any other math, right? You basically have $2,500 minus $2,500, and your spouse has $2,500 with no minus. And so they're going to be sharing 1/2 of that $2,500.
Oh, interesting.
It's basically a clawback where you walk away with 3/4 of the total.
Oh, interesting.
Based on how the math works. I know it's complicated. Okay. And just always remember that if you're tracing and it goes into a matrimonial home, it's the exception to the exception. You are not going to get the benefit of that exclusion. Okay. So there's a start, there's an end, and there's everything in the middle that you want to connect the start and the end to, and you don't want that end to be a matrimonial home. Okay, that's tracing. Okay.